Coaching. Lessons I learned from the legends. When I began training, I had some of my best successes when I was working and teaching people doing my one on one sessions. Ever since then, I've been sharing the benefits and the techniques with managers, how to do one on one sessions to help their salespeople sell more and be more productive. Hi, my name is Scott Hembro from Hembro Business Systems, and I feel today, more than any other time, I think that we need to reconsider the effectiveness of our training efforts. We need to reconsider the management and leadership styles we use, and ultimately start to focus more on how coaching sessions can be used today more than any other time to grow and improve our sales team. So, the goal of this session is to share with you how I started to learn how to be a better coach, how I started to learn how to do better and more effective one on one sessions, and introduce you to the people I learned from that I'm calling the legends in these sessions. Now, one of the first people that opened my eyes about the benefits of being a better coach, I discovered from a guy by the name of Don Beveridge. He started with a very short management class, and he taught very simply that there's four styles of managers. Now, the first style he called the non-manager manager. Now, this is a manager that's, does what's expected of him, but doesn't do any more. Doesn't want to make any waves. He follows everyone that works for him, is working at sort of a mediocre level of performance, and he focuses a lot on paperwork, especially because he's got the ability to hide behind it. Now, the next is the cop style manager. Very much into the details. Hopefully, he's going to find someone doing something wrong so he can write him a ticket. He's always looking for the negative. This is also the guy that has to approve everything. His people don't want to do anything without his okay. First, as a result, um, he has to be there all the time. Otherwise, nobody's going to do anything because they're afraid he hasn't said yes to it beforehand. Then we got the Superman style manager. He's got his blue spandex on and his red capes, and every time there's a problem, he swoops down and solves it for everybody. And another problem with the Superman manager is nobody grows. Everybody just sort of relies on Superman, coming in and fixing everything for them. Now, the fourth kind of manager, that's what we call the coach. The coach knows the importance of building a team. He teaches, he listens, believes in the team's members, pushes them harder than they're pushing, and he's always very optimistic about the team. Now, the coach is the manager I wanted to be. So I started digging and found an article all the way back about the benefits of the coaching manager. And the article said using this technique, you're going to learn the individual's strengths and weaknesses, and then you can individually help them get better. Coach begins to understand the players better and what motivates them, how to communicate with them better. There's a lot more that I read about the benefits of that coaching style of manager, which just made me want to learn more. So I started buying books and reading and studying from who I felt were the best coaches. And the goal of this session, I'm going to share with you the lessons and the principles that I learned from these great coaches. Also, after these individual ideas, I'm going to share with you from my experience working one-on-one with in dealerships how these people have implemented these ideas and why I feel they're the fastest way and most effective way of growing your sales force, selling more units for your team, and ultimately the dealership. So let's get started with the lessons and principles from the legends in coaching. The first person I turned to and started trying to learn from for coaching was John Wooden. And I started with his book called They Call Me Coach. And then he has another book that he followed up with called Coach Wooden One on One. For those that are not familiar with John Wooden, he was the coach of the UCLA basketball team, and he coached them to 10 NCAA championships, including 7 in a row. And at one time, the UCLA basketball team had 88 consecutive wins. So the first thing that jumped off the pages that he shared was the preparation and the detail he would go into, not before the game, but before the practice. See, Coach Wooden had a quote that he would share time and time again, and it was, if you prepared thoroughly for practices, the game would take care of themselves. Let me repeat that. If you prepared thoroughly for the practices, the game would take care of himself. So I'm thinking to the automobile business about all the training we're doing. and how much preparation I do for the practice. Because you see, the practice is the training session, and the game is when we're on the floor. And this man is spending all this time on the practice, preparing for the practice, and I'm just walking in and doing it. So obviously, I've got some learning to do here. So the one idea that transformed me about the approach working with salespeople would be better preparing for the training classes. So I started better preparing for meetings that I'd be conducting, and I learned from Coach Wooden that it's not only to prepare overall for the practice, but he breaks it down to the individual that you need to prepare for. From that, I made the decision that I was going to start learning how to do one-on-one training with the salespeople from Coach Wooden's formula. And if I could spend an hour training, and if I was going to spend an hour individually with the teammates, you know, that meant that I had to spend even more time preparing for it. But the results were off the chart, and it was the best technique that I used to help train people. But it meant that I had to prepare better in order to do the one-on-ones or to do the training sessions. So prepare for your meetings, prepare for your training sessions, prepare for your one-on-one sessions that you're going to be having with people, and they'll work phenomenally well. The next coach I turned to is a gentleman by the name of Patrick Lencioni, and he wrote one of my favorite books called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And at the beginning of the book, he shares this quote: "It's not finance, it's not strategy, it's not technology, but it's teamwork that remains the ultimate competitive advantage, both because it's so powerful and so rare." In his book, Patrick spends a great amount of time sharing the impact decisions make within a company when a company has poor communications. And the dysfunction that I wanted to talk about in this session, that I got the most out of his book, was the fundamental foundation on his pyramid that he builds within a company. And that's the dysfunction that's created because of the lack of trust. As I relate it to the automobile business as he was teaching it, and I saw it unfold many times, when I was hired to come into a dealership and install or to set up a BDC. I mean, time after time, I'd go into a dealership, and the dealer was the one that had decided to put the BDC in. Nobody other than him was involved in the decision. The result was there was virtually no support from the sales manager, from the salespeople. It was like we were on an island out there in the middle. They weren't involved in the decision, and as they say, they had no impact on it. And so that was the attitude they took. Here's another scenario that I would hear all of the time because I was working with them with the BDC and the internet department. A dealer would go to the annual NADA convention, and while he's there, he'd get all excited, and he'd buy a new CRM. Come back to the store, tell the manager how great it's going to be, how great life is going to be, how it's going to do this better and that better, and blah, 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 blah. But that lack of involvement, that lack of being involved in the decision, offering an opinion, will it do this, will it do that, boy, look out for this. That lack of that creates lack of trust. And that's one of the fundamental, that's a dysfunction in a store. And that's one of the things that a coach, we can handle better by involving people in discussion, letting them talk about it, letting them offer their opinions, and being involved with it. And when we get them involved, they'll own the decision. But when we cut them out, which is what I've described in this particular dysfunction, that's when people don't support something. They don't own it, and they don't buy in on it. So as a manager, we want, and as a leader and as a coach, we want to get them to help own the decisions with us. The next lesson I learned on coaching came from a book called The New Gold Standard, and the gentleman's name was Horst Schulze. Now, he was the president and CEO of Ritz-Carlton for over 30 years, and we all know the name Ritz-Carlton and how they stand for excellence, with their facilities, the food, the way their employees take care of the guests. And the question is, how can they get such a high level of customer service and customer treatment for their guests when they're working out of the same work pool that we are today? Well, Horst had a very unique way that he would set the groundwork. He would set the foundation for working with his employees. First of all, he made sure everybody understood that we were all equal. And so he had a quote that he shared with them: "We are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen." And so he wanted them to know that he really thought a lot of them, and that they were very good, handling very good people. So he knew that he had to have a lot of pride, you know, in his people. That his people had to have a lot of pride in the organization. They had to have a lot of pride in the service. They had to have a lot of pride in themselves. And the way that he started out doing this is he would welcome every employee that came to work for Ritz-Carlton all around the world, and there was some 35 or 40 of them. Every single one of them, he would personally handle the employee indoctrination. He would fly all the way across the world to do the session, because he wanted them to hear from him the history of Ritz-Carlton. He wanted them to hear from him what Ritz-Carlton stood for. He wanted them to hear from him what he expected, what Ritz-Carlton expected out of them, and the delivery and the service level that they wanted delivered to their customers. And by hearing it from him, there was such a commitment that these people appreciated, that went to work there. That was one of the things that brought their standards of service so high. Early on in my career, I used to do sales training for new hires. It would be a 3 to 5 day program. But I would insist that on the first day, the dealer would come in and spend 45 minutes to an hour with these people, welcoming them. Tell them the history of the dealership. Tell them their story about how they got into the business. Tell them about the business, some ups, some downs, some advice that they can have for them. And I mean, you can't imagine how impactful that was for the people. They would, if I worked for the people 3 or 5 years later, they would still remember that talk. Now, on the adverse side of that, think about people that go to work in an organization, and I can't tell you how many dealerships I've been in where they've hired people, and they go to work and they don't know the dealer, they don't know the story, they don't know the history, they don't know anything. They don't know anything about the guy that even signs their paycheck. And there's a big difference in the message that you're sending to your people. And Horst used to send a great message to his people as far as how much he expected out of them, but what he delivered back to help prepare them to do that. Great lessons, gold standards. Okay, the next person that I'm going to share with you, you may have already heard from. His name is Dave Anderson. Dave's been around the automotive field for a number of years. He wrote his first book back in 2003 for dealers and managers called Up Your Organization. He now has a company called Learn to Lead, and they do a lot of management training and a lot of other things for dealers as well as other industry. And his most recent book that he wrote, the name of it is, it's called It's Not Rocket Science. Now, this is one of the handiest books I have run across. It's one of the best books I've read in many, many years, because what it does is it helps you take all of these other ideas or all these training programs and it helps you implement them better. So the simplest way to describe this book is it's an implementation guide. See, Dave wrote his first book in 2003. He's written about 15 books since then, but he realized he needed to help people implement things better. I'm sure you can, agree with, situations I've had. You've had the same ones. You've had a great training class. You thought everything was going well, everything was going to be good, and a week later, nothing changed. Well, it's about the implementation. It's about coaching is not about how good the coach is. It's about how good the coach helps the people get. And part of that responsibility is helping them implement things better, implement things faster, implement things more efficiently. And It's Not Rocket Science gives you a blueprint to help you get things implemented better. Great book, must have. It's one of the top books that I would suggest and study. The final person that I want to introduce you to when it comes to being a great coach is a gentleman by the name of Bill Campbell. And there was a book written about him by the title of The $1 Trillion Coach. And I questioned how could anybody be a $1 trillion coach until I got to reading it and found out he was a personal coach for Steve Jobs. A bunch of the other board members like Al Gore and Mike Cook over at Google. Larry Page, Eric Schmidt, the people that founded Google and developed it into the mega company that it is today. He was personal coach to them. His personal coach to Zuckerberg, to Bezos. So, I mean, I guess you can be a $1 trillion coach if that's your clientele list. Now, one of the things that he touched on that I was really happy to hear is that, not everybody is coachable. And the three ingredients that he said that people must have in order to really be coachable are: number one, they got to be honest. They have to be honest with you, honest with themselves. No BS. Number two, humility. They got to be willing to listen to ideas and constructive ideas. And number three, they got to have a willingness to push through, to really try hard, and to constantly be learning. So, the favorite thing that he shared in his book that he would not answer when people would come to him and say, "Hey, how do I fix this? What do I do here?" He wouldn't give them a direct answer. He was a great listener, and he would have the people really, really explain, what they were looking for, what their issues were. And he found a lot of times by having the people just really describe it, they'd come up with the solutions themselves. When that didn't work, he would tell a story. He would have a story that would tell, that would go in, and a lot of times, most of the time, those people would end up solving their own problem. And then the extension of that, he says you have to be a really great cheerleader, to push the people, to help them really want to strive. I could keep going on and on with the lessons I learned from these legends and on how to be a more effective coach. Because you see, my goal when I was writing this program was the importance of developing, good coaching techniques, and then what are the benefits to you, your people, your organization, if you were to address some of the coaching skill opportunities that I've laid out in front of you here. Now, here's something else I want you to consider. Another side I want you to look at this thing. When I started in the business many, many years ago, the average salesperson sold 8 to 10 cars a month. It was the same thing 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and it's the same thing now. The average person sells 8 to 10 cars a month. Now, does that suggest maybe there may be a better way of working with our people? And could that possibly, have anything to do with the coaching that we're talking about today? Now, let me share another scenario with you. And by now, I hope that you're aware of the fact that I offer dealerships a program where I teach salespeople how to use social media to develop business on their own. In other words, I teach them to use Facebook and other social media platforms to market themselves. Now, here's an interesting situation. A dealership has two very strong salespeople. Both of them have built their business up to where they're both averaging 30 units a month. And 75% of that business is coming on their own, that they're developing leads from Facebook and LinkedIn, that they're creating them on their own. Now, here's the issue. And the thing that is the issue is that with these two salespeople's numbers, results, they're skewing all the numbers in the CRM. Because you see, here's what happens. When they get a lead that comes in, when they get somebody that replies to them on LinkedIn, replies to them on Facebook, they don't necessarily run over to the CRM and put that name in there. They just keep on communicating with the person, and eventually, when the person comes in, that's when they'll actually put that person into the to the CRM. They'll put them in there when the person actually comes in, physically comes in, settles on a car, they write it up, and they deliver it. So, the fact that they're selling 30 units a month, we cut them some slack. Or should we insist that any lead, any self generated lead, needs to go in at the time that the lead is generated? That's the question. Now, the good news is these managers have been working very, very closely with these people. We've been working on coaching skills here as well as developing the social media side to it. And these managers have a tremendous amount of trust with these salespeople, and they know that it's been a team effort, and it could go either way. Okay, so there's some scenarios that come out of this. Now, selling 8 to 10 cars a month, you know, for a salesperson, that's a decision because there's opportunities out there that they can sell more cars. But also, selling 8 to 10 cars a month for a salesperson is a decision by you, Mr. Manager, and it is by you, Mr. Dealer. Because with improved coaching, with teaching our salespeople how to use social media to create their own book of business, with your sales managers doing coaching one on one, reinforcing the training one on one, you could develop one or two or three salespeople selling 30 units a month. And if you did that, could you reduce your advertising investment and maybe reinvest some of it back into salesperson advertising? And how much would obviously all of this impact your bottom line? Now, those are some pretty wild questions. But you know what? These are decisions. A decision is to sell 8 to 10 cars a month. Selling 30 cars a month is a decision. Using social media is a decision. Coaching is a decision. Not using coaching is a decision. Not using social media is a decision. Not selling 30 cars a month. Mr. Dealer, Mr. Manager, I can help you with these things. This is what I've done for the past 30 years. And I can help you with the coaching. I can help you with social media. And we don't have to have 8 to 10 car Freddies on our force anymore. My name is Scott Hembrow. I thank you for watching this. Again, my goal when I wrote this program was to share coaching techniques with you, and I hope they benefited from you by listening to the legends of coaching. Have a super great day, and thank you.